Imagine a car. Not just any car, but a rolling symbol of the American presidency. A 1961 Lincoln Continental for 1,000 pounds of steel, chrome, and secrecy. Now, imagine this car as a coffin, because that is what the SS-100X, President John F. Kennedy's presidential limousine, ultimately became on November 22, 1963. But here is the chilling truth. The man who oversaw the car's modification, the head of the Secret Service's technical unit, was convinced he was designing the safest car in the world. He was wrong, and the mistakes, the bizarre modifications, and the structural weaknesses were all documented, then conveniently buried. We are not talking about a simple oversight. We are talking about a systemic, almost purposeful dismantling of standard safety procedures, a chain of decisions that turned a fortress on wheels into a death trap. Start with the color. A deep, gleaming black, which was actually a temporary coat, as the car was initially painted a distinctive, almost royal blue. The Secret Service insisted on a quick, less reflective black for the parade, a minor detail that speaks to the chaotic, rushed nature of the entire operation. But the true horror lies in the roof, or rather, the lack of a proper roof. This wasn't a standard convertible. This was a custom-built, highly modified piece of rolling command post architecture. The bubble top, the protective, transparent acrylic canopy designed to repel everything from thrown objects to light gunfire, was right there in the garage, but it was not on the car. Why? The official story is that the weather was too nice. The president wanted to be seen, to feel the Texas sun. A beautiful day, a moment for connection with the people, became the most critical vulnerability. That decision, whether made by Kennedy himself or by a Secret Service agent keen to please, hangs over the entire tragedy like a dark, suffocating cloud. It is the first and most devastating psychological trick played on the American public. The belief that a simple preference for sunshine could override basic security protocol for the leader of the free world. We have all seen the Zapruder film, the fleeting, horrifying moment. But zoom in. Look at the car. The rear jump seats where Governor Connolly and his wife sat were mounted high, giving the occupants better visibility, but also presenting a larger, more stationary target. This car was engineered for display, not defense. It was a stage. Every modification, from the removable top to the handrails for agents, was meant to enhance public access, not presidential protection. It was a conscious choice of image over safety, a choice that sealed its fate. And the modifications didn't stop at the exterior. Under the hood, the car was a beast, but the frame itself was constantly stressed by the sheer weight of armor plating and the massive communication equipment, leading to subtle, almost imperceptible design flaws that could affect its maneuverability and stability in a high-speed emergency. The truth is, the SS-100X was a paradox. A heavily guarded piece of machinery that was fatally exposed by its own design. Now, let us move past the obvious removal of the bubble top. Focus on the Secret Service agents themselves. Their standard operating procedure involved riding on the car's running boards or standing on specially built steps at the rear. But on that day, for reasons still debated and suspiciously documented, those agents were instructed to drop back, to ride in the follow-up car. Why were the human shields, the men whose sworn duty was to take a bullet, not positioned to do their job? Who gave that order, and was it an act of professional incompetence or something far more calculated? The route itself, a seemingly innocuous path through downtown Dallas, was a Secret Service creation. It was meticulously planned, not for speed or security, but for maximum exposure, leading directly into the infamous curve onto Elm Street, forcing the car to slow down to a near-crawl right in front of the book depository. The car, the route, the missing shield, the dropped agents, it all forms a pattern. A perfect, tragic confluence of errors that seem almost too improbable to be accidental. This is the narrative the public was fed. A simple, lone gunman taking advantage of a casual moment. But what if the car itself, this gleaming black Lincoln, was the intended co-conspirator, designed with the potential for failure built right into its high-tech, highly modified frame? The questions surrounding the vehicle's maintenance logs and post-assassination modifications are even more disturbing. Was the car immediately secured as evidence? No. It was rushed back to Cincinnati, stripped, rebuilt, and put back into service for Presidents Johnson, Nixon, Ford, and Carter. Think about that. The crime scene vehicle, still bearing the scars of the assassination, was effectively sanitized and reused, erasing critical forensic evidence. The psychological impact of reusing the death car on the subsequent presidents is a subject for another time, but the forensic implications are staggering. Any attempt to trace bullet trajectories or structural damage was compromised, destroyed, or deliberately obscured by a quick-fix modification that took place in the days immediately following the tragedy. The ultimate betrayal wasn't just the shots fired, but the subsequent cover-up surrounding the car's fatal flaws, a mechanical lie that continues to haunt American history. We have just scratched the surface of the SS-100X's dark secrets. Next, we dive into the Secret Service's bizarre, handwritten rules for the modification that ensured no two presidential limousines were ever truly the same, a perfect system for plausible deniability. We talked about the missing bubble top, the dropped agents, and the tragic route, but the deepest, most systemic failure of the SS-100X lies within the bizarre, almost contradictory specifications laid down by the Secret Service's technical architects. These were not off-the-shelf security features. They were bespoke, often counterintuitive modifications that turned the Lincoln Continental into a unique, structurally compromised vehicle. The rule was simple and devastating. No two presidential limousines were to be identical. Why? Plausible deniability. If one vehicle failed, the next would theoretically offer different, unknown challenges to any potential threat. This paranoia, however, created a fleet of custom-made vulnerabilities. The SS-100X, for example, was designated a quick-change vehicle. It was designed to have parts, like the roof and certain body panels, easily removable and interchangeable. This ease of disassembly, while convenient for PR and quick repairs, fundamentally weakened the car's structural integrity. Imagine a heavy-duty safe, but one where the bolts are designed to be unscrewed with a common tool. The engineering decision alone is a psychological mind game. A car that looks armored, but is designed to be easily taken apart. The vehicle's frame, a crucial element, was constantly under duress. The modifications added nearly a ton of weight. Communication gear, extra armor plating beneath the doors, high-output air conditioning units necessary to counteract the heat of the communication equipment, and the heavy, custom-built power steering. This added weight stressed the unibody frame beyond its original factory tolerances. The Secret Service essentially created a car that was perpetually fatigued. We have documents detailing repeated issues with the suspension, chronic tire wear, and an alarming instability at speed. These weren't minor glitches. They were symptomatic of a fundamental design flaw. The car was too heavy for its skeleton. This leads us to the critical component, the windows. Although the clear bubble top was absent, the car still featured thick, custom-made glass in the doors and front windscreen. However, these were not the highly resistant, multi-layered ballistic glass you would expect today. They were simply thicker, heavier panes, designed to resist objects thrown from the crowd, not high-velocity rifle rounds. The designers made a choice, opting for heavy, distortion-free glass that offered a good view, rather than slightly curved, highly resistant glass that might obscure Kennedy's face. It was the perpetual balancing act between the myth of the accessible president and the grim reality of a high-threat target. And the biggest secret of the SS-100X, the fuel lines and gas tank. While armor was added to the sides and floor, the massive, vulnerable gas tank assembly was not fully protected, an almost unthinkable omission for a vehicle carrying the commander-in-chief. This was a direct, documented oversight, an invitation for disaster, a silent, ticking bomb rolling through American cities. The question is not if the car was compromised, but how many hidden weaknesses were deliberately or incompetently designed into this rolling paradox. Setting the stage for the unimaginable in Dealey Plaza, we must now turn our attention to the lost records, the paper trail that was hastily destroyed and reconstructed in the days following the assassination, which holds the key to who ordered the final, fatal compromise. We left off questioning the lost records, the paper trail that could reveal who signed off on the SS-100X's structural compromises. But the car itself, even with its weaknesses, was only one part of the equation. The other, equally crucial element, was the path it was forced to take. The infamous route through Dealey Plaza. This was not a standard, high-speed security transit. This was a choreographed spectacle, a deliberate choice of exposure over safety, mandated by the very agency sworn to protect the president. Here is the stunning, almost unbelievable truth. The Secret Service chose a path that required the presidential limousine to make 2 near 90-degree turns and slow to less than 10 miles per hour in a densely populated, elevated area. Psychologically, this is an act of calculated vulnerability. You teach an agent to never let the protectee become a stationary target, yet this route explicitly engineered a 3-minute period of agonizing, slow-motion exposure. The official explanation was that the route was necessary to showcase the president to the people of Dallas, culminating in a planned turn onto a freeway. But examine the maps. A far safer, faster, more direct route to the Trade Mart where Kennedy was headed existed, one that would have avoided the perilous bottleneck of Dealey Plaza entirely. So, who insisted on the route of no return? Evidence suggests that the final, decisive sign-off came from high-ranking Secret Service officials in Washington, overruling the initial recommendations of the local Dallas police, who had voiced concerns about the slowdown points. The local police wanted speed and minimal turns. Washington ordered public spectacle. Imagine the internal battle. The local experts screaming about risk, the distant bureaucracy demanding maximum visibility. This decision to prioritize public relations over basic security is a psychological red flag, suggesting that the goal was not protection but presentation. The SS-100X with its exposed roof was the stage. Dealey Plaza was the meticulously designed trap. When the car made the slow, grinding turn onto Elm Street, the driver, Secret Service agent William Greer, had to brake sharply, almost coming to a stop directly in front of the Texas School Book Depository. This was the moment the car's design flaw met the route's fatal curve. The car, being heavy and having those chronic suspension issues we discussed, was slow to accelerate out of the turn. It lingered. The speed of the vehicle is one of the most hotly contested variables in the entire assassination debate. Greer's actions, that sharp brake, that slow response, have been endlessly scrutinized. Was he obeying a strict requirement of the route, or was his driving compromised by the car's structural fatigue and poor handling? The car's own design made it a sluggish, cumbersome target, incapable of the immediate, explosive acceleration that might have saved the president. It was a victim of its own modifications. And this is the final, chilling irony of the SS-100X and its path. The car was designed to be easily seen, and the route was designed to ensure it was seen slowly. It was a perfect synergy of fatal incompetence, or something far more coordinated, leaving the world with an image of an exposed, decelerating president, a picture of vulnerability that haunts us to this day. The investigation into the incident never adequately addressed the route selection's security flaws, choosing instead to focus solely on the alleged lone gunman. But the car and the route are inextricably linked, two gears in a perfectly meshed mechanism of disaster. Next, we uncover the shocking details about the lost photographs taken just moments before the tragedy, photos that might have confirmed exactly who ordered the fatal security lapse. We talked about the design flaws of the SS-100X and the deadly choreography of the Dallas route. But the most audacious act of the entire tragedy was the systematic, almost instantaneous destruction of forensic evidence surrounding the presidential limousine. When a major crime occurs, especially one involving a vehicle, that vehicle becomes the most protected piece of evidence, a sealed crime scene. Not the SS-100X. The moment the car reached Parkland Hospital, the chaos began. Secret Service agents, under unclear authority, began removing items from the car, wiping down surfaces, and failing to secure the integrity of the vehicle. This was a critical failure that compromised any future investigation into trajectory and ballistics. But the true scandal lies in what happened hours later. Before the day was over, before proper forensic analysts could fully document the damage and the crime scene, the Lincoln Continental SS-100X was loaded onto a military jet and flown straight to Cincinnati, Ohio, to the Hess and Eisenhart Customization Company. This wasn't a forensic investigation. It was a rushed, high-speed sanitation operation. Think about the audacity. The murder weapon, the prime piece of evidence, was deliberately put into the hands of the company that originally built and modified it, the very company whose design flaws we are investigating. Their mission was not to analyze. It was to rebuild. In the days that followed, the car was stripped bare. Critical structural elements that might have shown deformation or stress were replaced. The entire interior, which contained biological material and trace evidence, was ripped out. The small, almost imperceptible scuff marks, the potential entry and exit points for projectiles, were ground down and painted over. The car was transformed, in effect, into a completely different vehicle, erasing the physical history of that fatal journey. The psychological effect of this rush to sanitize is profound. It suggests not just an interest in restoring the vehicle for future use, but an intense urgency to hide or alter the narrative the physical evidence told. Why the rush? Why not hold the vehicle for 6 months, a year if necessary, to ensure every piece of data was extracted? Because, as we now know, certain pieces of evidence, particularly regarding the car's post-impact behavior and the precise angles of the gunfire, were inconvenient to the official lone gunman theory. This immediate, high-level compromise of the crime scene vehicle is the largest, most glaring question mark hanging over the entire investigation. The rebuilt SS-100X returned to service for Lyndon B. Johnson, now featuring permanent armor plating, a non-removable bulletproof roof, and thick ballistic glass. All the features that were conspicuously absent or compromised on the day of the assassination. This change was a silent, official admission of the car's fatal security flaws, but only after the president was killed. The most disturbing missing pieces of evidence, however, are the lost photographs, not from the public, but taken by the Secret Service themselves. Their official procedure included taking a specific set of photographs of the presidential vehicle before and after every major motorcade. Where are the photos showing the before condition of the SS-100X on November 22nd? They are missing, deliberately withheld, or conveniently lost from the archives. These images would confirm who ordered the bubble top removed and who authorized the agents to drop back, solidifying the chain of command for the security lapse. The sanitization of the car and the disappearance of the photographic evidence are two sides of the same psychological manipulation, controlling the physical facts to control the historical truth. Next, we will reveal the shocking, almost unbelievable modifications made to the SS-100X after it was returned to service, showing how its original compromised structure continued to haunt subsequent presidents. We have traced the SS-100X from its fatally flawed design to its swift and suspicious sanitization as a crime scene. But the story of this phantom car does not end in the scrap heap. In a twist of dark, bureaucratic necessity, the death car of President Kennedy was resurrected. It was not decommissioned, it was recommissioned, put back into active service for subsequent presidents. Lyndon B. Johnson, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, and Jimmy Carter. This is where the psychological horror deepens. Imagine the chilling message this act sent. America's most high-profile murder weapon was polished, armored, and driven, day after day, year after year, with the new leaders seated in the very space where the tragedy unfolded. The psychological toll on the occupants is immeasurable, but the modifications themselves are a stunning admission of all the original car's fatal mistakes. The redesign, undertaken by Hess and Eisenhart, was comprehensive and utterly contradicted the car's initial specifications. The temporary, removable bubble top was replaced with a permanent, fully enclosed, and non-removable ballistic canopy that weighed hundreds of pounds. The flimsy, decorative side windows were replaced with inch-thick, non-opening, bullet-resistant glass. The chassis, which had been dangerously stressed by the original weight, was reinforced with steel plating, fundamentally altering the vehicle's handling and stability, but finally giving it the protection it should have had on day one. They added titanium armor plating and a state-of-the-art communication system that was hidden deep within the body, reducing its visual profile. They essentially built the tank that JFK was denied. But here is the critical, often overlooked detail. Despite all the reinforcements, the structural scars remained. The rushed, immediate post-assassination modification compromised the ability to properly integrate the new systems. For instance, the new armor and canopy, while offering protection, added so much weight that the car's already weak suspension and heavy engine were constantly overburdened, leading to frequent mechanical failures and poor performance. Presidents Johnson and Nixon both reportedly complained about the car's sluggish acceleration and rough ride, subtle echoes of the same problems Agent Greer faced in Dealey Plaza. The car was a Frankenstein monster, part presidential stage, part armored vault, and part rolling ghost. The fact that this vehicle, still legally the SS-100X, carried for subsequent presidents speaks volumes about the government's desperate need for continuity and control over the historical narrative. By continuing to use the car, they could claim the tragedy was an isolated incident, an anomaly, rather than the result of systemic, identifiable security failures. They were driving around in a piece of manipulated evidence. The original car's structural secrets, the compromises in the chassis, the quick-change assembly points were simply paved over, not fixed. The SS-100X thus became a living nightmare, a perpetual reminder of a security failure that was never fully investigated, but instead was literally covered up with steel and bulletproof glass. This resurrection was the ultimate psychological trick on the American people, convincing them that the system was fixed, when the truth was that the government was simply driving around in their own mistake. Next, we will dive into the final, bizarre chapter of the SS-100X, its final retirement and the ultimate fate of the vehicle that holds so many secrets. To truly understand the catastrophe of the SS-100X, we must travel back to its dark genesis, the secretive workshops of Hess and Eisenhart in Cincinnati, Ohio. This was not a standard factory production line. Presidential limousines were, and still are, handcrafted nightmares of complexity, and the SS-100X was the beginning of this modern era of compromised safety. When the car first rolled off the Ford assembly line, it was a perfectly capable sedan. But the moment it entered the modification shop, it began its transformation into a bespoke, risk-laden vehicle under the explicit, often bizarre, guidance of the Secret Service's technical division. Imagine a small, dedicated team of engineers, operating under intense secrecy, being given impossible contradictory demands. They were ordered to add the heaviest, most complicated communications equipment, massive radio racks, encryption devices, and multiple phone lines, all while maintaining the illusion of a sleek, accessible convertible. This dual mandate introduced immediate structural compromise. The engineers essentially had to cut the car apart, reinforce it with heavy, ad hoc steel plates to support the gear, and then cover it up, making it look factory fresh. The process was less about standardized protection and more about improvisational engineering under pressure. One of the most revealing aspects of this initial build was the construction of the infamous quick-change roof system. It wasn't just a simple convertible mechanism. It was a complex array of latches, support brackets, and electrical connections designed to allow a heavy, multi-paneled roof system, including the bubble top, to be removed and installed quickly. This complexity meant multiple points of failure. Every latch, every wire connection, was a potential weak spot in the car's rigidity. When the bubble top was left off in Dallas, those exposed latch points weren't just decorative holes. They were engineered vulnerabilities that allowed the car to be easily disassembled. It was a system built for convenience, not crisis. Furthermore, the installation of the high-mounted jump seats for dignitaries like Governor Connolly was another Secret Service requirement that prioritized political visibility over protection. To install these elevated seats, the floor pan had to be cut and reinforced, creating yet another structural anomaly. The SS-100X was, by design, a labyrinth of custom cuts, welds, and additions, a perfect vehicle for a lone gunman to exploit. The engineers were forced to operate on a need-to-know basis, often unaware of the final security specifications, which were only known by a handful of Secret Service technical directors. This fractured knowledge base ensured that no single person could definitively sign off on the car's overall safety, scattering accountability across a complex web of secrecy. The true shocker is the sheer amount of documentation that was generated during this complex, years-long modification process. Tens of thousands of pages of plans, blueprints, memos, and installation manuals. Almost none of it was ever made fully public. The few documents that were released contained suspicious gaps, missing pages, and altered dates, strongly suggesting a deliberate effort to conceal the full extent of the design compromises and the identity of those who ordered them. The SS-100X wasn't merely flawed. It was meticulously engineered to contain those flaws, a handcrafted trap built layer by layer in the pursuit of political image over human life. This hidden process of compromise is the final, essential key to understanding why the car failed. We now turn to the ultimate fate of this historical monster, tracing its path from presidential service to its final, ironic resting place. The long, grim road of the SS-100X, the vehicle that served as both presidential limousine and compromised crime scene, finally came to an end in the late 1970s. After nearly 2 decades of carrying the weight of 4 presidents and the indelible stain of tragedy, the car was fundamentally worn out. The perpetual stress of carrying tons of added armor and the massive ballistic canopy, all piled onto a frame never meant to sustain such bulk, had taken its toll. The reinforced structure developed chronic metal fatigue, the powerful engine perpetually labored, and the expensive, frequent maintenance was no longer justifiable. The Frankenstein monster was finally retired from active service. But the government faced an unprecedented dilemma. What do you do with the most famous, most tragic car in American history? You cannot simply send the ultimate piece of compromised evidence to the scrap heap. It must be managed, curated, and controlled. And so, the SS-100X was transported to the Henry Ford Museum in Dearborn, Michigan, where it sits today, entombed in a glass box, a perpetual silent witness. This final resting place is where the historical irony reaches its maximum, devastating power. When you stand before the car at the Henry Ford Museum, you are not looking at the vehicle John F. Kennedy rode in on November 22, 1963. You are looking at a meticulously reconstructed deception. The car on display is the armored behemoth that served Lyndon B. Johnson, Richard Nixon, Gerald Ford, and Jimmy Carter, the version with the permanent, non-removable, bulletproof roof, the titanium floor plating, the inch-thick ballistic glass, and the comprehensive armor package. This is the corrective version, the one built only after the president's death, exposed the original design's fatal flaws. The choice to display this armored reincarnation is the government's final, silent, and brilliant act of psychological manipulation. By showcasing the car as an impregnable fortress, the narrative subtly shifts the blame away from the Secret Service's deliberate security compromises and onto the unpredictable malice of a lone assassin. The display effectively argues, look how safe the car is now. The previous version must have simply been unlucky. The physical presence of the armored SS-100X acts as a historical firewall. The visitor marvels at the safety features, completely distracted from the actual scene of the crime. The open, vulnerable convertible with the bubble top deliberately removed. The agents waved off the running boards, the slow, exposed path through Dealey Plaza. The display is a masterclass in concealing systemic failure through overcompensation. Furthermore, the car's display perpetuates the cover-up by what it deliberately omits. Where are the high-resolution photographs taken by the Secret Service's own technical team, detailing the before condition of the car on that morning in Dallas? Where are the maintenance logs detailing the chronic suspension failures caused by the custom-built modifications? Where are the internal Secret Service memos that spelled out the contradictory rules for the quick-change roof and the high-mounted jump seats? These documents, the paper trail of accountability, remain classified or conveniently lost, scattered in various government archives, inaccessible to the public. The car in the museum is divorced from its own documentary evidence, forcing the visitor to accept the official narrative rather than investigate the car's true, compromised genesis. The car itself is a forensic paradox. Though cleaned and reconstructed, the physical alterations remain. The ghost marks of where the roof sections were hastily removed, the subtle discolorations where new metal was welded over old, potentially compromised seams, and the undeniable weight that still strains the chassis. For historians and forensic engineers, the displayed car is a piece of actively corrupted evidence. A crime scene that was rebuilt and put back to work, its structural narrative rewritten in steel and Kevlar. Its existence forces a continuous, unsettling question. Why the rush to rebuild? Why the necessity to put a crime scene back into presidential circulation for nearly 20 years? The implied answer is chilling. Control over the narrative and the desperate need to reassure the American public that the office of the presidency was impenetrable, despite all evidence to the contrary. The SS-100X, in its glass tomb, is the enduring symbol of the American government's willingness to prioritize narrative stability over forensic transparency. It is the rolling ghost of November 22nd, forever locked behind the thick, distortion-free glass it should have had all along, silently screaming the secrets of its engineered failure, secrets that the public is still prevented from fully grasping. The car's final, ironic function is not to teach history, but to manage perception, preserving the image of a corrected past while concealing the true depths of the catastrophic security lapse. The ultimate truth of the SS-100X remains locked within its armored shell, a constant challenge to every visitor who dares to question the version of history sealed right before their eyes.